Okay, if someone can just confirm you can see my screen in the chat box. Great. All right, let's get started. And if everyone can mute their phones, I can still hear a little bit of feedback. That would be helpful so everyone can hear. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Smalley. I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid Services at the Coordinating Board. I am so glad y'all were able to join me today. Today is actually the last official monthly webcast of the year. I will be going through a little bit more information at the end of the presentation to tell you about a couple more training opportunities we'll have. But as far as our monthly webcast, this is our last one because I cannot believe it's actually the end of the year. I don't know how that happened. It's probably with all the changes and virtualness, and I'm sure a lot of y'all have things like that going on in your own personal lives, but it feels like the time has just flown by. So more to come on training opportunities. And of course, if you ever have questions or inquiries on training, please let me know. So let's get started with our topics today. So our topics of discussion are going to be the net price calculator. I'm going to be doing an overview of that. I'm also going to be going through the 21-22 TASFA updates that were released to institutions. I'm also going to be going through the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Funding information. And then lastly, I always do an updates, training, and deadlines session. I do hear someone not on mute, and unfortunately I can hear a lot of background noise. So if you can check to make sure that you're on mute, that would be great. Thank you. All right. Let's see here. So net price calculator is required for public institutions that enroll first-time, full-time students, undergraduate students. So health-related institutions and private institutions are not required to complete the state's net price calculator, but all the public undergraduate institutions are required. So we recently sent out a memo that is now requesting that institutions upload their information to the coordinating board. This is done annually. And as a reminder, it was postponed a bit this year because the college student budget process was also postponed due to COVID. So we did just recently send that out on August 27th. We sent out a memo, and I'll be going through some of the important information on there. But one of the things to know about is the program guidelines for net price calculator. If you go onto the Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, our main page, on the right-hand side, we went ahead and added the guidelines and the login portal tool. So when you pull up the guidelines, it has a breakdown, a step-by-step update of the tool. So that's my recommendation, is to go get those instructions first if you've never done net price. And then if you have additional questions, you can always reach out to get assistance. When you click on the admin tool, you're going to come to a screen that looks like this. Now, each institution's issued out their own login, username, and password. So it's not person specific, it's institution specific. So again, if you're new to the process, you would need to reach out to the coordinating board to get your login credentials. You can't, access it without those, and you can't reset it either. In the event that you can't get in or no one at your institution knows it, go ahead and send the inquiry through Contact Us, and someone will reach out to provide that to you. So let's talk about the memo a little bit. As you should be aware, many years ago, they passed a law that said that all institutions have to provide net cost to students. So this was a federal law that was passed, and it is under the Higher Education Act of 1965. The state of Texas also issued the same statute that falls under that law, and so the two laws definitely coincide with each other. So the coordinating board uses the same requirements as the federal calculator. And so the two items that the institution has to provide for the annual update are to update the financial award amounts that a typical student that's full-time first-year degree seeking. We have a set template that you have to upload with that information into our tool. The other thing that has to be done that's a federal requirement and a state requirement, is to include the percentage of the cohort that received grant and scholarship aid under the optional text section. This is something that we've never monitored or regulated at the coordinating board as a completion topic. So, for example, this year we'll be going into the net price calculator just to confirm that that's there so that we can mark you off the list. So that is new for the process. It's not new for the federal requirement. It's always been there. It's just nothing that we've actually, I don't want to use the word audit, but we've never gone through and checked that item before, but we will be this year just to make sure that they're in compliance. All institutions are required to submit the data by October 2nd. So in the event you're having issues, again, logging in, uploading your data, you have questions on how to do it, for sure reach out so that someone can assist you. But for today's presentation, I wanted to just go through quickly on how to update the optional text since that has actually been a newer item.
Lawan Byford
is not available. The mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages at this time.
Let me see if I can mute that.
Goodbye.
Okay, I think that's done. All right, so I wanted to walk everybody through the optional text section since it's always been an option when you upload the tool, but this is how you're going to add the cohort percentage rate in there. So when you log into your account and you go to the optional text section on the left-hand side, a box like this pops up. In the event it says that it's inactive, you do have to change it to active by updating the radio button and then hitting save. If you can't do this and it won't allow you, it gives you an error for some reason, you do have to reach out to the coordinating board and we'll assist you. If it's already activated and you already have information in there, you'll want to go in and revise your optional text. You can put any kind of disclaimers or information you want the end user to see, which would be like the general public, a student, a parent. Whenever they're filling out the net price calculator information, this is what pops up on the end screen. So you can put all of that in there. But most importantly, you do have to include that percentage of grant and scholarship recipients there. You do have to determine what cohort that's going to align with. So if you're submitting your 2019-20 cohort for your financial aid data, then that would be the percentage of students that you would need to report in this box as well. So for example purposes, I did put an example. It's for 18-19. So I put in 2018-19, 38% of the full-time students enrolled for college for the first time received grant and scholarship aid. So that was at my institution. Once you have that entered in there, you hit save, and then the student, it's real time, so the student would automatically be able to see that when they complete the net price calculator online. So again, the aid year that you're entering needs to match the financial assistance that you're uploading into the tool. I'm not going to do a demo of net price this year because I actually did it last year, and I believe it was the April webcast. So if you, again, are unfamiliar and you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can either download the guidelines and look through those because it has some screenshots and step-by-step instructions, or you could go back to last April's webcast, I believe, and the net price walkthrough is on that webcast, and it has not really changed outside of the optional text requirement that we're going to be doing. So that is my net price calculator overview. Again, the October 2nd is coming very quickly, so if you need assistance, please let me know. I'm typically the one at the coordinating board that works on net price, so I can set up a call one-on-one to go through that with you, and I've already done that for a few schools this year. So let's move on to TASFA. So the Texas application for state financial aid is the state's application for students that cannot complete the FAFSA. So this is a supplemental application, and to align with the federal application, we release it by October 1st, if not earlier. But in order for schools to be able to update either their vendor or their website, or if they want to brand it in some way, we got feedback a few years ago and said, hey, you know, if y'all could release it a month early, then we could kind of know what to expect and get ready for the release before the students get a copy. So we did release the TASFA to institutions, and so you won't be able to find this anywhere. So if you're thinking, wait a minute, I haven't seen this, you do need to reach out to your director, or if you are a director and you didn't receive it, reach out to me directly. I will forward you a copy. Because again, we did not post it on the internet, because if a student were able to Google search or go onto our website, we didn't want y'all starting to receive applications too soon. So we did release that through our normal memo system. And again, we did that so that institutions could prepare. We only released the English version at this point. Both the English and the Spanish versions of the TASFA will be posted on College for All Texans either on or before October 1st. And then we typically post that on our SFAP page as well, so you can get it in both locations. So let's talk about some of the changes. Now, I should tell you first that the way that these changes come about is not only do we have a subcommittee, a TASFA subcommittee, where that includes multiple institutions at multiple types of institutions. We all get together and we talk about, what changes would be most beneficial, and we have those conversations. And then on top of that, we also issue out a survey to institutions through our memo system, collecting feedback. And so we take all of those things together. We talk about what are the most impactful for the year, and then we make those updates. So these are some of the ones that we decided on this year. So one of the overwhelming requests was for sure to make sure that students know that they have to fill out every single question or mark NA or indicate some way that they read it, right? So we did throughout the application put a little reminder to fill in all questions or mark NA if there's a space available. That way it's clear that it wasn't intentional that they left it blank. So pretty much on every page, you're going to see that reminder now in red so that the student knows that's something that they need to complete. When you get down to the selective service box this year, everyone thought it would be helpful to actually add a hyperlink to the Social Security selective service web address so that they could go online and see what the requirements are and to read about exemption requirements. So that's now embedded within the application, so they can click on that and see if they're supposed to submit their registration, if they're exempt, and just adds that additional level of resource information for them. And then lastly, we got some feedback that, the last box on the form was not very clear, that by marking it, they could be, excluding themselves from eligibility. So now we added a note at the bottom that says, choosing this option may result in the loss of your eligibility, so that they know that, they really need to reach out to their school if they feel like they are not registered, or to see what the next steps are on the process. So moving on, one of the biggest updates this year that we did was we added adjusted gross income. And we did that because the FAFSA asked for that information, and historically we didn't really feel it was necessary, but there's institutions out there that do pre-awarding, they do pre-packaging, they send out award letters, and in order to appropriately kind of estimate aid, you need adjusted gross income. So it was going to help institutions that have that methodology to help them get students, a better idea of how much aid they were going to receive. And similarly, we added the taxes paid, because that's also necessary in the EFC calculation. So now, instead of waiting for the documents that we know students don't always submit with their TASFA, you have to hunt them down. This allows you to do a better, clearer EFC calculation without having to wait for those forms. So those have been added. Everything was kind of moved down. The dislocated worker section was moved down, which I'll get to on the next page. But as you can see here, it should align with the FAFSA now. So we have 2 questions for the student and then 2 questions for the parent. And on both of those, we have NA boxes the whole way down so that they can clarify if that doesn't apply to them. moving on, like I just mentioned, dislocated worker, we broke it out into kind of its own section this year, and then we added a tiny bit of clarity to the question. So not only do they know it's for their situation right now, but also we added, see the notes page so that they can go reference how to fill out that question. And then lastly, on this page, we modified question 74 just slightly. It was previously number 70, but we did go back and look at FAFSA and tried to better align the language there so that it was clear that they should not include W-2 earnings. We got feedback on that said that that would be a lot more helpful. All right. So let's talk about Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. I'm sure people are wondering, what we're going to talk about today on that, and it's kind of the buzz around the institutions, I'm sure, and maybe you've never even heard of it, so you're going to get a little lesson today. Like I mentioned, Deshae Reed's on the call. She has been working, I feel like night and day on this program, and she knows a lot about the eligibility requirements and just exactly how the money is moving through the system. So again, I asked her to be on so that she could answer questions that you may have, but we'll go through it together first. And like I said, if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat box and she's going to try and respond. And then if necessary, she can get on the call and provide some answers. But let's talk about this. So as a result of the novel coronavirus, excuse me, the United States Department of Education awarded grants to governors for the purposes of providing local education agencies, institutions of higher education, and then other educational related entities with emergency assistance. And they called that the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. So for our purposes, I'm just going to call it GEER because that's a lot to say. So as we go through this, I'll just reference the GEER program, but let's get into it a little bit. So the governor issued the coordinating board quite a bit of money. I think it was close to $100 million. I don't have the exact amounts, but when those funds come to the coordinating board, we have to issue those out to eligible institutions. So in order to receive those funds, an eligible institution has to sign and return two things. They have to return a contract that we sent and also supporting federal documents. As of today, we still have 30 schools that have not submitted their contract. And so what that means is those 30 schools have not received their aid yet for these students. And these students are the ones that are impacted by COVID, and they need those funds to supplement their financial aid or to get emergency assistance. So we are asking on this call, please, please, please make sure that you get that contract in. If you have a reason why it's being held up, if you can communicate that with Deshae directly, that way she knows where you're at in the process. We just want to ensure that institutions are able to use this funding. We don't want it to lapse or be ineligible. So if you can do that, then we can get you your money that much more quickly. Now let's talk about the contract highlights a little bit. So the contract has a lot of information that's useful in there. It talks about the eligibility requirements on how you use the funding. It talks about the types of reporting that you're going to be required to do. It talks about the allocation amounts and then the deadlines in which to use the funds. So let's talk about, what kind of funds there are, because it's not just one bucket of money. There's actually two types of GEER funding available. So for public institutions only, there is a 2021 funding for emergency educational grants. For both types of institutions, both public and private institutions, there's another pot of money which provides additional funding for the state grant programs. That includes Texas Grant, the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant, and the Tuition Equalization Grant program. So that money is to actually supplement the funding that was lost through the allocation process. So now institutions still have access to those funds to help students with these grant programs. So let's talk about the first one. That's the emergency educational grants. This is only for the public schools. This was created to provide financial relief to victims of the pandemic through federal funds, and it's to help these students attain their educational credentials. So we want to make sure that students that are affected by COVID have access to this money. The important thing to note about this emergency educational grant is there's not a lot of time to use the funding. The deadline that institutions have been given, and it's within the contract, is November 2nd of 2020. You have to disperse all the GEER funding through this program to eligible students. Any money that is not used has to, or unexpended funds, I should say, must be returned to the coordinating board by November 16th of 2020. So like I was kind of joking about in the beginning of my webcast, you know, time is just flying by. We're already almost mid-September here. And so in order to identify and get those funds out, schools have to be looking at their population and deciding who's going to get those funds based on the eligibility requirements. An important note on GEER for this emergency educational grant funding is that it has to be kept separate from the state grant funding that's issued. You cannot transfer funding between the two allocated amounts, okay? And again, all of this is within the contract if you have a copy of that. So let's talk about the highlights of the emergency grant funding. The funds can only be used for a single semester, and since that's going to occur sometime between now and November, that should most likely be fall. The recipients must be Title IV eligible. So this would not be given to your TASFA students or any undocumented students or any students that do not complete a FAFSA. They do have to fall under that category of Title IV recipient. The grant has specific eligibility requirements written into the contract. There's an entire section on who can receive it. So you have to make sure that you're following that protocol before you issue any funding. And then lastly, an institution is prohibited from using funds for administrative costs. So these are unallowable expenses. So the other program that I mentioned before, this is for both the public schools and the private schools. I have a few highlights for this. There's not a lot of information within the contract for this because it really does just align with the state grant eligibility requirements. The only caveat is that they must be Title IV eligible. So we've gotten a lot of questions asking, you know, well, how do we know if somebody's going to receive this funding? You really need to just look at the general eligibility requirements. And then on top of that, they do have to be Title IV eligible. So there's not as many extra details in the contract for this particular pot of money. So I'll get into how you get questions answered if you have additional ones that can't be answered in the contract in just a moment. So unlike the emergency funding, these funds can be used through February 1st of next year. So you do have a little bit more time to plan and look at your spring quarter or term or semester and make those decisions. But unexpended funds must be returned to the coordinating board by February 15th of 2021. So the monthly report that's within the contract, they wrote in that each month, starting October 1st, the institution has to report back the amount of money and the total student count that have received GEER funding. So the coordinating board right now is working on that report template. You don't have to create it yourself. We're going to issue that out. We're trying to get that out as soon as we possibly can so that on the 1st of October, you can submit that information. It's going to be very basic because that's what the contract encompasses is 4 items if you're a public school. So it's going to have the year-to-date total number of students who received the state grant funded by GEER, the year-to-date amount of funding for the state grants, the year-to-date total number of students who received emergency grant funding, so this would not apply to the privates, and then the year-to-date amount of GEER funding for the emergency funds. So again, the report should be very basic. We are going to collect that each month, and then we'll potentially issue out some guidance on that. And if you have questions, you can always reach out and we will answer those the best we can. Lastly, I mentioned that, you have questions. We're getting lots and lots of questions. So a lot of those questions may actually be answered already. If you go to our main Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, at the very top, we added a brand new FAQ page, and it has the word new with the little asterisk there. When you click on that, we have a long list of FAQs. They're broken down by categories. The first category are contract questions that we've received. Then we have one broken out for the state aid programs and the funding related to that, and then the emergency educational grant funding. So all three categories are there. Each time one is added, we not only add it to the page, but we send out a memo through our notification system letting you know that that's available. And each time one is added, we put the date on there so you can see, timeline-wise, which ones are new. We do have an additional frequently asked questions that's going to be released either today or tomorrow. So please keep an eye out for that one. It will be added to the page, and again, you'll receive a notice. And like I mentioned, to Shay Reed, because she is the expert at this point, I'm asking that you email her directly. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to direct you to our Contact Us link, but because she's overseeing the questions for this program, if you can email her directly, her email there is at the bottom. It's deshay.reed@highered.texas.gov. She will get back with you with the response. Before you send her an inquiry, though, please make sure you go through the FAQs. There are actually a lot of answers within those FAQs. I've read through them multiple times to answer people's questions as well. So use that as a resource before you call her or contact her. And then, we'll continue to add to this page as those questions come through, because I know that frequently asked questions is one of the most valuable things that we can post out there for you right now. So that is all I have on GEER. If you have questions right now, go ahead and type them in the text box. She will respond to you or come on the line at the end and we can go through questions. I'm going to keep moving forward to our other topics so that we can get through the presentation. So some updates, training, and deadlines. So if you did not know, we finally released the allocations. They are posted on the recent communications on Stay Connected on our webpage. All of the programs have been released at this point. The special programs, as we call them, which include bilingual, work study, mentorship, Texas College Work Study, and educational aid, those were released on August 20th. And then the grant programs, Texas Grant, TEOG, and TEG, were released on the 21st of August. Financial Aid Database, or FADS, Cycle 3 will begin on September 28th of 2020. We still have schools that are needing to validate Cycle 2. So as a reminder, you can't move on to the third cycle until you finish with Cycle 2. So please, if you're not done with that and you need assistance, reach out so we can help you. Otherwise, the new cycle will begin in 2 weeks. Another quick update, we're still experiencing issues with our pre-disbursement changes in HelmNet feature. They are working on it. We've been testing it for a few weeks now. And until then, if you can send your inquiries through Contact Us, we can update those for you, such as loan period updates, cancellations, disbursement date updates. Anything to do with loan processing that you cannot complete on your own, you can send those through to us. And I'll be going through the steps on that in just a moment. Lastly, institutional phone line update. We're in the process of testing that. We've been testing it for a while now, but we're hoping to have that up and ready soon. I say soon because I don't have a date and I hate to give you something and then it doesn't happen, but we are working diligently to get that up and running so that you can contact us more easily. So once that's available, we'll send out a notification and you'll be able to use the institutional phone line that we used to use before we were sent home virtually. All right, so let's talk about training. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this is the last monthly webcast of the year. Kind of bummed because I really look forward to these and I think that they're valuable. They give good information, but because of the holidays approaching and everything else, we decided that something that we may do is something called a training series, and that's a dedicated training topic. So instead of doing multiple things in an hour, I'll do one topic that is relevant for that time frame. So for October, what I'm proposing is doing an overview of the state campus-based report. We get lots of questions every year on how to fill out this particular report. And since the webcast and the report deadline are pretty well timed, I think that that's the topic I'm going to do. So again, it'll be dedicated to this one topic, and you can have your business office or whoever completes that report on, and then we can go through questions on the form, and that's the only thing we'll talk about other than maybe some updates and some other things that might be useful. But again, October, November, and December, we have not hashed out all the details yet. So keep an eye out on our webpage, and then of course I'll send out a flyer once it's available, and you'll just join just like here, and we'll record it and post it online for people. The other thing that's coming up is TASFA's ABC workshop. It's October 7th through the 9th, but because of COVID, it's being done virtually. So we've been asked to record our presentation. This is for newer hires or new financial aid administrators. So we, as the coordinating board, are getting our presentation recorded, and that will be posted on their website. So that's a nice opportunity as well. If you have newer folks, or if maybe you're curious what we train about, you can listen to that presentation, and it's coming up in the next few weeks. Some deadlines to be aware of. The TASFA program, the Texas Armed Services Scholarship Program, there was a deadline in August for legislators to submit their appointments, and that was extended to September 30th of 2020. So if you know students that somehow missed the deadline, that was extended, and they can still get appointed through the end of the month. Once they're appointed, they'll bring their letter to you. I think it's called a nomination letter. I can't recall the exact name. I think it varies between offices and the legislator, but they bring that to your office, and you go online, you certify that application, and the student has until October 15th to complete their application. Lastly, like I mentioned before, net price calculator data upload due October 2nd. So let's talk about my favorite subject. I talk about this every month now, primarily because a lot of people are working remotely, and because our phone line is down, is how do you get in touch with the coordinating board right now? We've gotten a lot of feedback like, hey, we can't reach you. How do we do that? And I go through this every month because we see a huge amount of inquiries coming through, and a lot of times they're not routed correctly. And that really delays us getting back to you with some help. So we're going to go through this again, and I'm asking you to reach out to anyone who needs this information, who does FADs, who does processing, who does eligibility requirements, anyone who submits an inquiry to us. I'm going to go through the proper channel for that. So like I mentioned, 99% or so, 99% are going to go through the contact us link. The only exceptions right now are FADs and GEER. Everything else needs to go through contact us. So if you have a FADs question, it needs to go through the FADs mailbox. If it's a GEER question, it goes to Deshay Reed. Everything else goes through here. So under contact us, you can send loan reporting requests. These should be rare at this point because we have our HelmNet online reporting function, so you can run your own reports, but we do sometimes get specialty report requests, so you can send those to contact us. Loan processing changes, which I mentioned earlier, that would be updating the loan period, the canceling a loan, updating a disbursement date, that kind of thing, or any research to do with a loan, you can send it through there. And then our state financial aid program eligibility. Another bullet that's not on here, and I can add it for another time, is user access. So if you're locked out of your account, because our phone line is not available, that's the best way to send it to us. And we can get your account either unlocked or give you a call and walk you through the process. When you're sending loan requests through, I do have a disclaimer here. If you can add those into one craft up to 10 students, That helps us issue those out much more quickly than going through ticket by ticket, because it's kind of a ticketing system that we use. So if you can add, 5 to 10 students per request, if you have them, that will help expedite the update process as well. So let's talk about how to update these so that they go to the right place and they get processed timely. So on the right-hand side, you can see the contact us fields that you have to fill in. The first one that is critical is entering institution. In addition to actually clicking institution, if you put your actual institution name, that helps us as well, because we have dedicated people that work on different types of institutions. The contact reason, this is by far the most critical, is putting financial aid question. Because a lot of people do loan processing, we see a lot of them going to one of the drop downs says student loan question, and naturally that makes a lot of sense. But because our area is under financial aid question, you have to mark that for all your inquiries. So again, if you know someone in your loans area that sends these through, please share that with them so that we can expedite their requests. So the 3 fields, you put institution name, financial aid question. Under description, you're going to write a detailed explanation of what you're asking for. We do also get a lot of tickets in that don't say much in them, and so we have to respond back saying, hey, we need more information. So if you can add that in there with a lot of clarity in it, that's helpful. Otherwise, we kind of go back and forth. Lastly, I've talked about multiple times now getting memos, getting notifications, sending out a notice. So you might be wondering, well, I don't get any notices. How do I get on that? All directors of financial aid should join this listserv. We put all the directors in the important notification section, and then we have other listserv topics as well. So once you go to the website and you click on the hyperlink there, it opens up a form. When you fill out the form and you put your job title, then we put you in the appropriate box. Once you hit subscribe, we go through and we add you to our notification system, and then we email you to let you know that you've been added. So you will know that you're included on that. So this is, again, it's very critical that you sign up if you're not receiving these notices, because this is where we send all of our official correspondence. If you miss anything, you can always go, if you see right above on my screen, there's something that says recent communications on our Stay Connected page. We always put a minimum of the last 10 memos that have been sent out. And so you can always go check there to see if you missed something. That's a faster way to do it. All right, I think I got through everything. Let's see. This is my contact information, so you can email me, provide feedback. Like I said, if you have specific questions about net price, I'm kind of the go-to on that right now, and I'm happy to assist. I have a Webcast survey link that tells me not only how I'm doing, but also has a topics section where you can give me feedback on what you would like training for in the future. That's where I got a lot of my topics for this year. So please take some time. It's a really quick survey. And I believe it's confidential if you want it to be. So that's available. And then there's that contact us link again. So select financial aid question, don't forget, as the contact reason, and then we'll get your inquiry expedited. And that is it. Questions, anybody? Let me go back and see how many came through. I don't know what to expect today. Let's see. All right. See a few coming through. Deshay, I'm gonna rely on you. Do we have outstanding questions you're still answering, or do you want me to circle back on anything? I see our institutions required to submit distribution. Melissa Robinson, it looks like yours hasn't been answered just yet. She says she does have questions, but we are good. Looks like she's going to be answering questions offline, so she probably tagged those and can answer those one-on-one once we get off the call. Let's see. Now we have a lot of people shooting through questions at the end here. So let's see. Lydia, that will probably be a question offline. Stanley, how long after the school submits the contract can we expect to see the funds? That's a question for Deshay. I don't think it's very long. Once the contract's received and we get it all into our system and we process those funds, it's just like any other funding source. So it's usually a few business days. So if you have GEER questions, if you can send those again to Deshay, it looks like, again, people do have lots of questions, which is great. One last question from Preston. Where will this recording be posted? If you go on to our SFAP webpage, under Learning Resources, there is a webcast archive page, which is where I put all of the recordings. And so everything up until this month is there. It takes about a week, if not a little bit more, to get it all updated and on our website. So I will send a notice to the schools once it's posted, but you can always check on there as well. Will we get the presentation by email? I don't send it through email, but we do post the PDF and the video on the website. So you can access either one. If you don't want to listen, that's fine, because if you want to just scroll through to the relevant slides, then you can do that. Perfect. Let's see. Deshay's still answering questions, looks like. What kind of documentation? Okay, so any GEER questions? Because it looks like it may take a few minutes for Deshay to respond to these. If you haven't typed it already, if you can email her directly and she'll get back with you. And then any of the ones that she's trying to answer right now, then she'll try and wrap those up. Any questions related to the other two topics, either TASFA or net price or any of the updates? Don't see anyone typing. All right, well, if you do, feel free to send that through Contact Us. You have my direct email. If it's something that you feel you need to contact me about, no problem. Say, where was the contract sent? The contracts were sent out to the president, I believe, and the director, Deshay. She'll type that in just a moment. Okay, so
yes, Leah, let me answer
Sure.
that. Contracts were sent out to the presidents as well as the financial aid directors. If you have not received your funding, we have issued out quite a number of GEER funds in the last week and a half to institutions. If you believe that you've sent in a contract and you have yet to get the funding, please definitely send me an email. I can assist you with letting you know when we actually sent those funds out. If you haven't heard back from me, I send emails specifically once I get a signed contract from the institution. So if you had not heard from me, then definitely reach out to me to find out whether or not I've gotten a signed contract. They do come from many different people. It may not come from you specifically as a financial aid director. It could come from others in your institution. If your director says that he or she had not received the contract, then it could be that whatever contact information we have on file for your director was not current. So please have that director send me an email so I can get the contract out to that person. Again, I appreciate all the great questions that you all have. I am thankful for you and your patience as I've gone through many questions that have come over since we started releasing out the GEER contracts. Please send me any additional questions to me directly, and I do try to answer them as quickly as I possibly can. So I appreciate your grace and your patience with me. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Deshay. All right, I see a couple net price questions on here. Says, does net price need to be updated if nothing changed? And the answer is yes. The way that we track that is based on upload submissions so that we know that it's been reviewed. And like I said, this year we have that additional requirement. So I would log in and check all your information, and you do have to resave it. And if you need help, let me know. The electronic TASFA form update, if any, that I don't have a lot of updates. There's a dedicated subcommittee or a legislative committee that was formed, I should say, and they meet to discuss a whole variety of topics. They've been working to figure out budgeting and what they're going to propose in this next session. So I'm not on that committee, so I don't have a ton of insight on it, but it's moving forward, but I don't have any information on when it would be available. So that was a really poor answer because I don't have an answer, but hopefully that helps. I will give information as I get it in the future. All right. I don't see any other questions. I see people are starting to drop off. So if you do have more, feel free to send those through via contact us. You can submit them to Deshay. You can email me. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Again, thank you so much for joining month after month. I can't believe it's over already for this year, but keep a lookout for those other training topics I'm going to be sending out. And I will see you next year for our monthly webcast. I appreciate everyone. Stay safe out there, and thank you for all you do. Have a great day.